Yes, I think we have started. So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for the session today. Uh, for our session on shaping the AI future, balancing safety, governance, and security. I am Pamela Shingupta. I head the marketing and content at V3, and I'll be your host for the next hour. So, really intrigued to see how the discussion unfolds today, especially because we have a really impressive panel today. Omar, Tess, and Manish, all of you bring a very impressive perspective to the table. So, without wasting any more minute, I think, Omar, if you start with introducing yourself and telling us how Cause AI is leading the charge in AI security.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited and honored to be part of the conversation. My name is Omar Santos. I am a distinguished engineer at Cisco, been at Cisco for 25 years. Before that, I was in government. And then now my task with Cisco and even outside of Cisco is actually trying to figure out how to secure AI implementations as people are not only experimenting, but putting LLM-based applications nowadays in many different solutions. And so at Cisco, that's what I do. Outside of Cisco, I am honored to serve in the board of a nonprofit organization called Oasis. And within Oasis, we have different projects. So one of them is one of the most successful projects, which is COSI, the Coalition for Secure AI. And I have also the pleasure to serve on the board there with Manish. And I'm the PGB co-chair for COSI. And in a very quick nutshell, COSI is a consortium of many organizations, including Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, of course, E3, and many others. And we're looking into three different elements that we're going to talk about throughout the discussion here today. So I'm going to be a little bit brief, but that's kind of an introduction of what I do and the conversation that we're going to have here today.
Thank you, Omar. So now pass it on to Tess. Tess, can we hear from you? A small intro from you, maybe, and how TechUK is leading AI security.
Thank you so much for having us today. Really looking forward to the dialogue ahead. My name is Tess Buckley. As noted by Pamela, I work at Tech UK, which is the trade association of the tech sector here in the UK. Think 1,000 tech companies in our membership, about 2/3 SMEs, and really feel grateful to be engaging and managing our programming on digital ethics and AI safety. So although I work with our cybersecurity team, I'm really coming at this with the intention to demystify and operationalize digital ethics through assurance mechanisms and standards. So that's what I'll be bringing kind of the perspective today and looking forward. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Tess. Manish, now I think we can hear from you and how V3 is collaborating with Tech UK and Cause AI.
Thanks, Pamela. Hello, everyone. I'm Manish Garg. I'm director at V3. Pleased to be here. And we are a company which is specialized in AI in terms of the implementation of AI systems in enterprises. We come with a deep expertise on AI models, customization of AI models or the open source model, as well as the sort of implementing, enterprise level implementation. And we bring in, from those experience, we bring in these perspective how in the real world, these challenges around governance, security, and safety interplay and have a sort of, impact on the implementation. And really pleased to be part of, COSI and Tech UK. Both are, organizations which we work quite closely and looking at advancing the dialogue on all of these pillars. So pleased to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, everyone. That's really amazing. We can already see that we have really insightful people today that we are going to hear from. So won't delay it much, but I'll quickly give you a brief outlook on how we are going to conduct the session today. So on each key topic that we have, I'll go to one of you and I'll start the discussion from there, and maybe followed by the other two panelists can join. And then we can have a rounded up discussion on each key topic. So to kickstart it off, I think I'll start with Omar. So Omar, in your opinion, what are the top security challenges facing AI today, particularly in securing AI models during and after deployment?
Yeah, absolutely. So to set the stage before we go into the actual problems or challenges or opportunities, depending on how you want to look at it. We all know that every single company, every single CEO, every single manager out there is actually asking their employees to do something with AI. And what you're currently seeing right now is that a lot of the traditional cybersecurity problems that we have are being reintroduced into the AI ecosystem. And then we have new challenges specifically to the technology and the underlying, models. And it's not only about the model itself, it's everything surrounded, vector databases, other, instead of inference, embedding models, and so on. So one of the biggest challenges that I'm actually seeing right now, other than manipulating the model itself, is that most companies, because they're asking their organizations on how to do something with AI, they give me a product that has an assistant or, some type of automated workflow, they are skipping some of those security best practices that we have learned for many years, including access control and so on. And then on top of that, they don't have even an inventory of what models they're using, where they're using it, for what purpose, for what data, and so on. So they have a challenge with data governance in the beginning. Second, they have now the challenge of the traditional cybersecurity dilemma, what most organizations haven't solved. If not, I would be out of a job. And then the third one is the newer types of attacks against these, models. So including, of course, model inversion attacks, manipulating the model and the ecosystem. For example, what we call confused deputy. Right now, that a lot of people actually are now trying to automate their workflows using AI, and specifically now in the advent of agents, there's a lot of the different techniques now that through the questions that we ask, in other words, prompts, that you can actually manipulate the application. And again, I know that we are going to be talking a little bit more in depth into some of these areas, but I wanted to actually kind of set the stage is that you have the traditional cybersecurity, the governance of data, and now AI models, and then of course the newer types of attacks against these ecosystems. I think you're on mute, Pamela.
Sorry, really sorry on that. So thank you, Omar. Thank you for that. I think just to be on the same line, maybe Tess, if you can let us know that from a governance standpoint, how should organizations manage these security challenges to maintain a compliance and transparency?
Thank you so much for that question, Pamela, and also Omar. I'll echo some of what you said here. Yeah, I just want to start with grounding in that AI is very much amplifying existing problems. And I think two key reasons for that is there's a lot more area to attack. So it's actually scale. And then also our adversaries have tools which make what they were doing in the past easier for them. And so I think it's important to not also reinvent the wheel here or start from ground zero, but just consider those two factors. And something we've been working on at Tech UK, and we did a bit of a deep dive on, is also red teaming, which I think I would like to start by just really platforming at the top of this webinar as a really incredible technique that we're seeing that is helping companies actually operationalize the ethics we talk about. Don't get me wrong, I love working in ethics, but what I'm really focused on is actually taking those to action. So I think in response to your question, I'm seeing a lot of folk turning to data inventory, data governance. And if they're starting from ground zero, turning to the OECD principles as the kind of key ethical principles, or if you're based in the UK, the 5 ethical principles that underpin our pro-innovation white paper, and then to take those in action, because they're more talking about what responsible AI is rather than how we do it. In America, which Omar, you can maybe talk to us a bit more, we're seeing the NIST risk management framework be a leading framework in practice, which I would like to platform as well. Whilst over in the UK, we are turning again to assurance and standards, but I think ISO 42001 is also a great place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess, for that. Just on the same lines, Manish, could you share your thoughts on how ensuring security aligns with safety concerns from an end user perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Pamela. So really, it's the end of the day. What's most important is how users feel about how user adopts this and take this forward. So really, all of the challenges really translate into the user understanding of it. And a lot of people have a question around trust and sort of awareness and sort of building trust around AI system. And one of the key things which comes to my mind from our experience in terms of the implementation is the explainability or referencing. So if AI model is able to reference or explain why they arrived at such sort of generation or the decision, then it builds trust in the user. User can understand why this is there. Second aspect is sort of building those sort of the systems and looking at misinformation or disinformation, or another term which is very quite popular is hallucination of AI system, is to work out the ways where the input as well as the output can both be taken care of from a misinformation or disinformation perspective. And that allows to sort of build the sort of user sort of understanding, awareness, trust, and then it will sort of drive more adoption. I think the safety, security get directly sort of impacts the sort of safety concern. If you implement takes care of all the security aspects, at the end of the day, you're going to get a good user system, which user will be able to use further and further and advance the sort of applications of it.
Thank you, Manish. So I think we had a really good start point. And like not just being the host of it, I am learning a lot. So before we jump on to the next key point, that is governance, another thing that I'd like to point out is our QA part is definitely open. And if anyone of the audience, if you have any questions that you want to ask our panelists, please get onto it. I think I'm sure everyone will love to answer. So having that set, now I think we can jump on to governance, and starting with Tess, from governance perspective, how can organizations establish frameworks that ensure ethical AI deployment?
This is a question we get a lot, and I think the question actually is more stemmed from the fact that there's too many frameworks. So the question is more, it's a place of overwhelm. Where are the gaps? Where are the overlaps? And how do we actually move forward and pick which one? So it's been really interesting to see recent releases from DCIT, the Department of Science and Innovation Technology, specifically the Responsible Tech Adoption Unit here in the UK. They just released a tool called AI Management Essentials, which is a great way for companies to kind of question where they are currently on their maturity. And so what it does is it actually takes the three key leading frameworks that I would probably reference here is the EU AI Act, so kind of Sense Analytic Standards, ISO 42001, which I said in the intro, and then also the NIST Risk Management Framework. And it funnels that into about 13 key questions and then asks companies to, kind of grade their own homework and provide a bit of evidence. And it was actually echoed, funny enough, off of Cyber Essentials, which eventually became Cyber Essentials Plus. So right now, for companies or people in the audience that are trying to, figure out which framework to pick for ethical AI or making that, a lived experience within your organization, I would turn to this actually very new tool. I'll try and share it in the chat. Because it's done a great job of taking those leading frameworks and boiling it right down to a way in which we could understand. And I think a big challenge we're seeing too is specifically for SMEs that are resource constrained, who in the organization is the best place to take on these tools, to perform these audits, and to even take these frameworks. And especially if actually you're not an SME and you're operating in multiple jurisdictions, it becomes a bit of a challenge. So yeah, without continuing, I would just point to this tool that was released last week called the AI Management Essentials Toolkit, which I think does a great job of making it a bit more accessible for organizations.
Thank you, Tess. Thank you. That was a great perspective on that. So being on the same lines, I think I'll go to Omar. So Omar, how do you see security being affected by the lack of governance frameworks, and what measures could be taken to fill these gaps?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I would really, really like the way that Tess framed this. It applies to security, it applies to pretty much everything, right? Having the correct tools, the correct people, and then making these tools actionable is a complex matter. Now, in my case, around security, definitely governance will help mitigate risks, especially the things that we were talking about earlier about inventory of data, inventory of the models. Do you even know what your third-party applications that now you're inheriting that also has AI kind of by osmosis? I call it AI by osmosis. You have the kind of the sandwich, as Gartner mentioned in recently, where you have third-party applications using AI and maintaining a truly a good visibility into how they're using your data with those third-party applications. So the applications that you run every day, from your operating system all the way to your business intelligence applications. And then you have the applications that your teams are actually building, and then selectively getting access to tools and data for AI to do something with it. And as you can imagine, in the case of security, all that can be a playground for attackers, right? If I manipulate any of your implementations and get access to sensitive data that should have never been exposed to an AI agent, then some catastrophic things can actually happen. And the last thing that I want to actually cover related to governance and security is that we also have to have a balance. Unfortunately, the threat actors, they don't obey any rules, so they don't care about anything about governance or regulations or anything else. While we do have to have that balance, right? And they, just like Tess mentioned, the level of access and the dual nature of technology of attackers using AI against organizations, it is inevitably that we need to also use these emerging technologies in order to protect our environment, right? So having that balance is a very complex thing to do by yourself, even for organizations as big as the one that we actually mentioned. I'm kind of spoiled because I work for a multi-billion-dollar company. But how can we make that accessible and that balance, kind of like security by osmosis or security by default, in there to the rest of the industry? So hopefully that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense, Omar. Thank you. Just to be on the same lines, so Manish, from a safety angle, what role does governance play in protecting individuals and ensuring safe AI interactions?
Yeah, thanks, Pamela, for the great question. But really, the safety gets directly sort of related to, sort of govern in this sense of how to sort of make sure the systems are not biased or not sort of, the ethics perspective is not sort of, prejudice from that perspective, takes care of those kind of concerns. And privacy does become another angle where, safety and does come directly into the governance. How do you protect everyone's data and data which is going in into the system as well as coming out from the systems? So both from taking care of those privacy aspect and taking care of the the biases and ethics. So one of the things that we see is in terms of how to take care of this, to implementing all of these principles into the code level itself. When we work with organization, we look at from a data governance to start with, even much before looking at the AI governance, and starting from data governance and then moving on to the sort of how to codify these principles into the AI models and AI systems. So we use a responsible AI development sort of life cycle with our clients, which specifies how to sort of implement the specific principles, and then sort of getting on to sort of and achieving and then building a sort of governance around it. One of the things that we've done with one of client is to implement ethics committee, and which looks at all of the other aspects which comes around all the issues which models, users of the model, you keep bringing up the new issues and then looking at, okay, these issues have come up of this kind of the information or hallucination, and what sort of bias and or other ethics we need to put in. So that committee really, becomes a central point of view. And then you look at, aligning with all of these sort of the other safety aspects and feeding into that. So I think safety eventually improves the governance. That's where I sort of look at, if you do the secured implementation, which in turn then improve the safety, and then in turn, enhances the governance. That's where I see sort of all of these getting interconnected.
Thank you. Thank you, Manish, on that. So just to be with you on the same lines, we'll now jump to AI safety. So, what would you think, Manish? What would you say are the foundational safety protocols organizations should follow or adopt to prevent unintended harm from AI systems?
So one of the main thing that sort of Uma touched upon is about securing the base system itself. The obviously AI systems are new, but the lot of the vectors of the security is still the same old. It's the end of the day, it's a system which runs in some sort of computer, whether it's data center or cloud. It's still you have to put in place the general security. You can say the framework or a boundary around it to really make sure that all of the input side of the model is covered, because input is the most important aspect. Once you are able to secure the access to the input model, then you need to look at aspects of inversion, or sort of kind of polluting the data itself, which gets used to sort of train the model. And then once you secure those aspects in terms of the access, and in terms of the security and all of the other aspect, then you look at the things like implementing the risk frameworks. Tess mentioned, and it's NIST's risk framework, and there's a couple of other risk frameworks. So you look at how to sort of test and benchmark those sort of systems and models around those risk parameters, and then adopting based on those risk parameters, adopting and adjusting the system to really make sure that you actually have a application of safety, not just about a talk around it. Just you apply, and then you apply those benchmarks, and then you look at what other improvements that you can do. I think the overall, it's about making sure that the risk frameworks are getting sort of implemented and published, as well as sort of produced. So that's what I would really say, stick around this question.
Thank you, Manish, for really putting that very easily to us. So, on the same topic, I'll move on with Tess. So, Tess, in your view, how can governance frameworks support these safety protocols to prevent any AI misuses?
I think they're really helpful in gathering people around a table and actually translating across teams. I think what AI has done sounds a funny thing, but the big question is like, who is responsible for responsible AI? And these governance frameworks allow the kind of responsible AI lead or the chief ethics officer, or whoever's been voluntold that this is now on their desk, to gather the proper folks around a table to have a dialogue. I mean, governance frameworks are, again, assurance tools, techniques. I point to systems and model cards as proving really effective as of late, specifically system cards, because they afford us more visibility on what we're seeing and on the kind of how these are helping prevent or decrease AI misuse. I think it's more from my perspective, and what I would say back is around like identifying misuse. So things like watermarking or crypto hashing have proven really helpful. I mean, there's no technical solution quite suited yet. I think we should continue innovating as well. These kind of safety features or assurance mechanisms, techniques allow us to identify and further report or communicate misuses. And I think something I just want to pick up on, Manish, and amplify as well in my answer here is like the importance of communication, cross-team communication, like getting your technical teams to talk to your non-technical teams, and then get your non-technical teams to talk to your comms teams. But again, flagging the work of the Responsible Tech Adoption Unit here in the UK, it's like if you read their bit on Introduction to AI Assurance, it talks about measuring, evaluating, and communicating. And I'm so shocked often as like how we forget about the communicating. And I think that is so important, specifically if you're like developing or deploying technology and you'd like your employees to engage with it and engage with it responsibly and productively, like bringing them into the dialogue and creating routes for redress and feedback is of great importance and is often forgotten. So bringing it back to the question, somewhat in response, I think governance and standards and assurance afford us space and frameworks where we can have a dialogue about ethics that doesn't feel as kind of high level or conceptual. It's about that translating. And so yeah, I think we could, and in governance, I think we could do a better job at communicating it.
Thank you, Tess, on that. I really liked the way you used it. That who's responsible for responsible AI. Really, really a thing to think about.
It's a
Maybe
big question, honestly. Like it is a big question. It's very, I mean, it boils back down to, change management. And I think we are seeing the space drift a bit into compliance, which ethics is not just compliance. Let me just say that. But yeah, and then if you look up the supply chain of like, we have this role, we need this skill, who's best placed? It's beautiful to see such diverse backgrounds taking on that role, but also we have questions around, qualifications and things. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that, I don't have an answer to it yet, but it continues to change.
we'll sure you'll have an answer. So moving ahead with Omar on the same lines, Omar, could you share how safety protocols intersect with security requirements, especially in the protection of user data?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I want to piggyback on that last piece of communication. It applies to everything. Applies to cybersecurity without AI, cybersecurity with AI, and so on. That is so important. And part of the communication is transparency. Transparency, communication between your team and communication to your customers, communication to the whole industry, and so on. And that should be definitely embedded into every single framework out there around how transparently talk about the usage of these emerging technologies, whether it's AI today, quantum next day, and so on. It is extremely important. Now, bringing it back to the AI implementations, Anthropic did an amazing job last year classifying different safety levels that were very similar to the US government biosafety level standards. They came up with these ASL, they call it, AI safety levels, ASL levels that are 5 of them. And of course, that's gonna, through time, it's gonna probably change and so on. But ASL 1 is the pre-transformer models, even if it's generative AI models, but pre-GPT or ChatGPT, that's kind of the chasm of what people actually, make the determination. And then ASL2 is what we are currently experiencing with large and small language models, right? Things that are mainstream, like the GPT models and Claude and Gemini and so on, or the things that we're now grabbing from Hugging Face, fine-tuning it, and somewhat putting in our infrastructure. I was actually in a conversation with Jason. I'm going to put him in the spot since he's not here, but he's the CISO of Anthropic, and we were talking about, when is ASL3, and we're expecting this to be months, if not weeks, right? And we already seen some of that. ASL3 refers to the systems that will then introduce some substantial increase of risk of catastrophic misuse. And what does that mean? Is that now within the model and things surrounding the model, because it's not going to be only one. Now you're seeing that the typical LLM application is using multiple, right? So you may use an open source model for summarization, another one for reasoning, another one for your tool calling and function calling. So it's going to be these complex systems. But in the model itself, what you're starting to see is the capability of self-reflection and reasoning. O1 preview in GPT, you actually already seen some of that. Within the next few months, you're going to see a lot more of these, right? And then not only within the model, but then you can use tools like LangGraph and Llama Index, etc., to create cyclical workflows. And now going back to the communication and transparency, most people are not going to know how these agents and how these menu of tools and data that you're giving access to are operating, yet alone the permissions that those applications or what we call agents, should have. As a matter of fact, a little bit of spoiler, and then I'm going to pass it, back to you. But this afternoon, I'm presenting in the IEEE conference related to AI agents and the safety and a lot of questions that should have been answered 10 years ago, but we still have nowadays, and there's no true answers, right? So bring it back to safety, that's ASL3. There are 5, right? So the other 2 is should we have an ASL4, ASA5 open weight model in the industry that anybody can actually manipulate? Or should those be not even connected to the internet? And if you want to actually solve something very complex that only a specific people actually have access to, but then you go into the dilemma of who has access to these models, right? Is it equality for everybody? So it's a very, very, very complex landscape that we're going to be facing, what we're facing right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Omar, for putting it so nicely for us. So jumping back to governance again, I'd like to ask you, Tess, what's your perspective on how organizations can build AI governance structures that fosters accountability and transparency?
I think it's an important question. I think accountability and governance is one of the 5 principles that we see in the UK white paper. In terms of how we actually bring it to life, it's been beautiful to see a lot of people. I think Manish included at VE3, you guys have a ethics board or like an ethics committee, which I think is such an important feature that I would hope for more work on. I think that AI audits that are done iteratively are really important as well, as a tool, and impact assessments. So trying to figure out how different technology might impact different groups prior to deployment. I think the word iteratively is said a lot. Like all these techniques should be done iteratively. And I guess my question continues to be like, what does that mean in terms of frequency? Is that like every few months? Is that quarterly? But I think that's an important feature because you can make a system somewhat fair and accountable, but then it goes and is used by users and operates in institutes, which can accrue bias from. Coming back to your question, I think a big thing here is routes to redress and providing feedback mechanisms, and also testing technologies within your company with a small use case prior to rolling them out across the board as well to get that kind of feedback. I'm not so certain that I've answered your question directly, but perhaps I'll pause there and you can share a follow-up if you'd like further detail.
No, thank you, Tess. I think you have answered it very perfectly. I'd like to move on with Manish on the same lines, actually. Manish, could you share your views on how accountability in governance impacts the overall safety of AI systems?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pamela. And I'll sort of add to what Tess was leading to as well. And what we see with, in terms of the accountability is the culture, which is more related to sort of how you as an organization really understand your responsibility towards sort of other staff members or to your colleagues, and or to your users. And really it's a challenge for most organizations to really embed this into their sort of the philosophy or culture, or sort of looking at responsibility or accountability. What we really start with, what we have seen with other clients, is before you talk about AI, let's say accountability of AI system, you talk about the data accountability. You put the owners of the data first. So because then you have who owns which data within an organization, and then you make a start on putting together the sort of sort of governance around the sort of the AI model. So that's one important aspect. And I think Tess mentioned about impact assessment and bias audit. It's really taking a model from all the input and output, and then doing a benchmarking around various biases, not just one type of biases. And biases you could define on a regional, global, or sort of various different levels, and then looking at how does your system, or how does your AI model is performing against those biases, and what sort of corrections that you can put in, either sort of an improvisation or tuning, and which ways that so that it can meet those the requirements. So it's about, I think, as it's about sort of keep testing it. And as we see this, most of models are getting better and better. So Umar touched upon sort of we are already at AS3 and we sort of ASL3, and we might have ASL4 very soon, which is about reasoning, planning, and doing sort of those long ranges analysis, and then getting back, getting on to that. So the systems are getting improved. One of the other thing is the feedback, I think, which has come upon, and I think many people look at sort of how OpenAI sort of started with the transformer sort of the research paper. But one thing that transformer didn't had was the feedback loop, which OpenAI implemented with this entire concept around RLHF and other stuff. So this implementing feedback into the AI models and AI systems becomes very imperative. And that's how you can sort of evolve, because system will evolve, you need to security levels will evolve, and as well as the safety levels will evolve. So you need to keep adjusting those models, not just a one thing set in stone, and sort of keep coming back to it. And so if the feedback loop, and we have seen this, one of the ways to sort of implement this is working out your pipeline of data on your model, and then sort of integrating this into your systems. That's where I think things get really into the system and into the organization. Hope I was able to answer at least some part of it.
Definitely, Manish. Thank you for answering it in such a nice way. I'll be on the same lines, and I'll go to you, Omar. So, how does security benefit from increased transparency, especially in terms of building user trust?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think I got ahead a little bit of myself talking about transparency earlier. It is a very fundamental thing that everybody has to adopt, is how can you build trust with your ecosystem? It's not only about customers, it's your employees, the whole ecosystem. And one of them is like, how are you using AI, and with what data are you using it with? Are you using your customer data for specific elements? Like I give you the perfect real world example. We're talking over Zoom, but we also have WebEx at Cisco. Actually, Zoom came from WebEx, but anyways, we created these models for generating packets for audio. And in this case, it's generative AI models that if you have 80% packet lost, it reconstructs your audio and it's crystal clear audio. Exactly the same day that and this is last year, that's exactly the same day that we released it. Of course, we got a lot of questions from everybody, internal, external. So you're digitizing my voice without my consent, and actually now putting audio in the thing, which is we're just basically replaying back. But we had to be very transparent on the use of the data, the use of the model, and even internally or remediation. We're gonna pull the plug and so on. So whenever it comes to security, definitely is paramount. Whenever it comes to ethics, bias, discrimination, absolutely 100%. Now, how do you maintain a balance? That's a big challenge. I like the way that Tess and Manish framed this, on where you have to have a feedback mechanism, either from human interaction or even automate the interaction to the model. I'll explain this. In my organization, we're also trying to figure out what is the most effective way that you can red team a model. And humans are not going to be that. I can tell you that right now. It's going to be a combination of humans and technology. There's no way that humans can scale for this. So what we're doing is we're actually training models that are becoming the attacker, and evaluators, and it's through a company, Robust Intelligence. I'm not going to go into a lot of Cisco stuff in here, but basically we have attackers, evaluators, and with reinforcement learning with AI feedback, that the attacker becomes better. In order for me to actually have an attacker, I cannot use just a GPT model or Claude and everything that has a whole bunch of guardrails. Guess what I'm using? An on-sensor model, right? Because that's what the attackers are going to be using, not a sensor model that now we're going to have a whole bunch of guardrails. So it's again the chicken type scenario, right? So that when you give that feedback to this model, so it becomes better, so you can find the vulnerabilities in your model that you're going to be using in production. If you do that with automation that has a lot of guardrails, you're never going to find the vulnerabilities that the bad guys are actually going to be finding in the model that you're going to be putting into production. So it's a really big balance on the elements on how to actually, defend the ecosystem, the transparency, how you're using it, and so on. So, hopefully that it provided a little bit of insights on these implementations.
Yeah, definitely it did, Omar. Thank you. And I think with this, we almost are at the end of all the questions that we have. And probably we can now jump into the QA part and we can hear from the audience and we can see what they have to ask the panel. So I can see there are some questions already popped in. I can see a very good question. Can AI security ever truly be future proofed, or will we always be reacting to the next big vulnerability? This is a great question. Does anyone of you want to start with this one?
I can probably break the ice and then I pass it to you since it's very. I think I'm the oldest in the group, so I've been doing security for a long time, and it's always has been a little bit of reactive, right? We have not solved the whole security problem, and now it's being amplified. We have to figure out a way on. We will never probably be ahead of every single threat out there. Why? Because as people know, we have to be right 100% of the time, and the bad guys have to be right only once. So it is going to be impossible. So of course, what we're talking about here is super important, and we're having a truly risk-based approach that you truly understand your risk. You apply whatever technology, whatever process, whatever structure, methodology, and so on that is possible to then protect that risk. Now, the challenge is that risk, the scope of it, is increasing on a completely different magnitude, right? So if you go back in time, even 5 years ago, and you say, hey, what is the crown jewels of your organization, right? Oh my God, these finance databases, right? It was very prescriptive. These databases, if they get hacked, we're gonna be, or this cloud application, if they get hacked, we're gonna be catastrophic. Nowadays, you're dealing with third parties, the supply chain security, AI now being incorporated everywhere. Your data is all over the place. So all that type of confinement of risk and everything is definitely changing, right? So again, we do have to find a balance, and I really encourage everybody to think about this: is how can we find a balance to take advantage of these emerging technologies to then help protect the organizations? Because if we keep with the current traditional approaches, we will fail.
And maybe I can add into what sort of Omar's point of view. This is one of the, looking at the next new thing, and that really is about collaboration. I think and that's where COSI and sort of Tech UK are there. COSI really looking at how we can sort of global level, we can share stuff and we can build sort of standards. So I think, and that's why some of the AI model, if you look at those open source models, really that everything is open and you can sort of look at and share where those could be gaps or where there could be new vulnerabilities. As the model gets evolved, our understanding will evolve. And that's why the more sharing which is there, and which is one thing in the cybersecurity or the security of the system, is more you share the challenges, the threats, the vulnerabilities, the better you would be able to tackle them. There will always be new things, but I think the more we share and more we collaborate on these initiatives, I think that the better we will be able to adapt.
I share your frustration, whoever else is in the audience, on it feeling really reactive. And I do always kind of try and help and encourage proactivity. I will say the way in which the legal system works, it's often like we act once harm is already caused. And it is really lovely though to see organizations trying to evaluate ways in which things could go wrong before release. And I think if we could be doing more of that would be great. But also, and please, Omar and Manish, or anyone in the audience for that matter, I think there's a lack of literature around the relationship between ethics and risk, and actually your organizational risk appetite and how ethics is considered in regards or in relation to risk. Coming back to kind of governance, or why someone would want to do responsible AI, is to be somewhat prepared or take steps forward. So Omar, perhaps from a more technical background, but I've been reading a lot more around SHAP and LIME technologies for explainability, which have proven really, really helpful. And I think moving forward and trying to be proactive looks a lot like acknowledging that governance or governance approaches, frameworks is a lot around like, what is responsible AI? But AI assurance and standards, which I've mentioned throughout the webinar and I champion wholeheartedly, is a lot of like how you actually do responsible AI. And you do responsible AI to decrease risk, and also try and prevent things from happening, whether that be scandal, whether that be, harm prevention as well. So yeah, that's my bit here, response to the audience question.
Thank you, Tess. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Manish. I guess that question was answered. So I see another very good question. If I can read it out. Do we see danger in over-regulating AI, particularly in sectors where innovation is critical, such as healthcare?
I don't love the narrative around regulation stifling innovation. And I'll tell you why. I think humans, we're not going to stop innovating. We're always going to keep doing. It's just regulation challenges the direction of travel. And also, I think it's not as fun to play a game if there aren't rules to operate by. In terms of sensitive sectors or how it might be sector specific, I think was the note, or in the UK. It's been really interesting to see, for instance, like healthcare and finance, and how they're reacting to regulation, financial sector being really highly regulated, and also having the skills around audits and using those in this new context. Whereas healthcare, which is also a sensitive area, is a lot of the people that operate in the medical sphere have been trained in ethics, whether in their undergrad or their postgraduate, and understand ethical frameworks and are not new to sensitive data or engaging with sensitive data. And so in these more sensitive areas, I think we should feel a bit encouraged that we're not starting again from ground zero, and we do have skills and frameworks that we can lean on as well.
Yeah, so I think I would just sort of add to what sort of Tess said. Well, I think it's regulation is always about nudging innovation, not just sort of kind of blocking or sort of, and that nudge is required sometimes, because innovation is really kind of an open innovation, and you sort of innovating and you learning and you sort of getting regulation. What it does, probably let's take care of this as well while you innovate, and this becomes an important aspect in terms of especially in the sort of the AI systems. And one of the things especially with the healthcare, is you've got the sensitive data, and what you wanted to make sure that the AI systems use of sensitive data has those ethical principles or ethical sort of considerations already inbuilt. And I think that's where this regulation nudge is sort of coming from that perspective. And there's one specific organization we've been involved, the Coalition for Health AI, which is quite active and sort of looking at the various aspects from an healthcare AI systems aspect. And I think that's about one of the point Umar also mentioned about sort of model uses, to be clear what data you're going to be, and that's more important in the healthcare sector, because it's sort of health information which is quite sensitive and quite private for individuals and for users, and you wanted to make sure that you don't use those in any other areas. It's very clear what data goes into which AI system and what the AI system that it does use for. So that's one thing to add. I think it will go both hand in hand, regulation and innovation. usually, healthcare industry has a lot of regulation around. Let's say the trials, clinical trials, there's a specific regulations built around how to go about it, what to do, and all of this. It's quite important.
From my side, we do have to have a balance. I do agree with Tess and Manish. That balance is hard. The regulation has to be needed in many sectors. It's already starting the conversation. And the good news is that, at least from my side, what I'm seeing is a little bit of that balance in most areas, especially I'm based in the US, so I can only talk about the US, some folks, critique that moving too slow, too fast, and so on. But I think that balance is definitely in the conversation. To bring things into perspective, and a personal note, I lead the Red Team Village at DEF CON. DEF CON is the biggest hacking conference in the world, as you actually know. A few years ago, we actually did somewhat of a workshop on what are the regulated entities and the leaders of regulations, including companies and so on, and then how they were the first ones that got hacked, right? So the narrative of actually enforcing some set of rules that then will also hinder you to protect against yourself. Again, the bad guys are not going to have that, right? So, and they are absolutely 100% currently. It's not if they use AI, they are using AI for obfuscation techniques. And I'm not talking about deepfakes. That's a problem of the past. The problem that we're going to be facing right now is a really sophisticated obfuscation techniques, exploit development on the fly. At the moment that you're publishing a vulnerability, like my previous work was in PCERT, so I was the person either blessed or cursed to actually publish the security advisories for vulnerabilities were very transparent. I can guarantee you the first ones that will read it will not be the good guys, will not be the customers, it will be the bad guys, and then we'll try to create the exploits. Well, imagine now that you have the power of AI. Immediately actually synthesizes that data, it goes looking into your third-party software and open source vulnerabilities, dumps the GitHub repositories that you created the code and what is in there, well, your vulnerable code and your fix. And in that case, I can automate an exploit like never before. They're already doing that, right? So if we hinder some of the protections to protect against that, we're definitely going to be falling way behind. So that is so much of a level of complexity on how to maintain that balance that again is going to be a pretty complicated mess, coming up in the next few years. Yeah.
Great example.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much of it is also like we talked a bit on it around use case and the importance of what the system's actually being or the tools actually being used for. And we see a lot of like different contracts of like access to data, for instance, for R&D purposes for commercial versus non-commercial. So maybe there's something there. And I think something I'd echo or emphasize, Omar, that perhaps say a bit more on is that aspect of enforceability is so important. It's like, yes, okay, we've got the regulations, we've got the principles, we've got the frameworks, yes. But then the big thing for me is like, okay, but do we have the right skills and people to enforce them? And how are we appropriately enforcing them? And it's actually more like the policy regimes around a specific approach, I think is so important and often left in the wayside or something like this, which I think enforceability is so key.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned earlier as well, like audit and impact assessment, that sort of how to sort of implement those. So the policy gets effective, enforcement gets effective.
Thank you guys for answering that. I am just learning from you guys. It's so lovely to hear from you all. I can see another very good question in the QA. I'd like to read it out loud. So, are there industry standards for testing AI safety in high stakes environments, such as autonomous vehicles, healthcare, or do you see any gaps in these standards?
We saw the AV bill make its royal ascent in the UK, which was of interest. And I do a lot of work with the British Standards Institute, So I would flag like ISO 27001 is more like information security, and then ISO 42001 is actually more like risk management frameworks. I think it's ISO 5469 is more like functional safety, and I think that would probably be the most relevant to your question. If you just go to the BSI site, like you can do a bit of a deeper dive there. Yeah, I think there could be, I think we could be doing more, specifically in AVs, because some of it is so socially and culturally sensitive. So what would be appropriate for like one religious group versus one age group versus the cultural tendency is like what I also question, but that's because I come from a background in philosophy. So, you know, I always reference that study that we've probably heard before, where it's like, if someone's going to swear, which way do they swear? Or if I drive as a Canadian in a different country, do I take on their rules and regulation around it? I think healthcare could do more around ensuring trust and communication with its stakeholders, specifically with marginalized communities that have historic relation and lack of trust with medical professionals. And I think a big thing that we might see in either the AI bill or the data bill is more around, I'm curious to see what comes up around decision making and using AI in delivering decisions or informing decisions as well. And I think we could see some more work specifically in the medical sphere. For instance, if I get a diagnosis, I would hope that it's delivered to me by a human that has maybe used the system to inform that decision. You know, I still fear confirmation bias, but I would be open to that rather than just having it delivered straight to me from a system. So I think there's still some work to do in decision making and rules around that.
Yeah, I think I would just add that one of the things that COSA is doing is looking at all different frameworks and looking at where we could sort of fill the gap and add on to, and then sort of looking at, so it's about complementing, and then sort of what I see is that having a one generic rule or generic sort of the framework or the sort of levels, and then you would have the industry specific ones. So while I think there's not a lot happen on the industry specific ones. There's more happening on healthcare than, let's say, the other systems, other sort of industries yet. But I think we need to get to that, on industry specific ones yet.
Yeah, I think the only thing we've seen in the UK from the RT is it's more guidelines of use. So you have the same frameworks that are overarching, but then you have guidelines of use that are like, they released something in HR and recruitment technologies that was specific, which proved helpful. And then you obviously had all the sector specific regulators release their approaches, and I think it was May or April, which also was helpful. But again, coming back to like enforcement, you release it, good, then what happens now?
Yeah, and one very quick comment, piggybacking to what just Tess mentioned about the enforcement or even auditability, that you're truly following, what the standard is actually saying, is going to be a pretty complicated. But what we have to encourage is agility. The way that we created standards in the past is probably going to have to change because technology is moving so fast. And these technologies apply to every single aspect of life, from healthcare, transportation, cybersecurity, etc. So the more agility that we have, the better that we will become. So that's what we're trying to, just like Manish mentioned, trying to harmonize within, and harmonize is a pretty loose word, but at least putting some guidance together into all the different standards that are now being started, how to operationalize it within your organization, and specifically for organizations that are not as large as the Ciscos and the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, right? Which in some cases are going to struggle, and how to, especially in the principles of security, how to put security by design, by default within any of the implementations. But I'll pass it back to you, Pamela, because I know that we're in the top of the hour.
Thank you, Umar. I would love to hear you guys for another hour, but I think, we are at the very end of the session. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Tess. Thank you, Manish, for sharing your insights with us today. It was a lovely session. And I guess I learned a lot. I guess every one of us learned a lot today. So, and thank you for each one of you who joined us today. And you all were a lovely audience, asked some lovely questions. We were able to answer some. Some I think we should answer in some other form. So stick around and maybe leave a feedback while you all end the session. But again, I'll say thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.